Well, hey. So this is my talk, things you should know if you want to be shipping games. So essentially, right, I assume if you're in this room, you want to ship a game at some point. Even if you don't, you should want to at some point. If you're a game developer, you've never released any kind of game, you should try and release one game, even if it's just itch. Even if it's just a jam game. You need to have some kind of idea of how big a task it is to release a game in the first place before you want to eventually ship on consoles. But if you do then decide to ship on console, there's plenty of things that you're going to need to know that I personally wish people had told me at the beginning. And actually, people did tell me and I ignored them. You shouldn't ignore this, right? Don't do what I did. So the first thing you're going to have to do, and everyone's going to tell you this, is you need to descope. You need to start cutting things out of your game. I'm really bad at this, and that's why it takes me 3 years to make a game instead of 1, like my friends. You're never going to be able to implement everything you want to in your game. You'll spend your entire life adding new features. If you see, this is Dwarf Fortress, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. This has been going since 2006. It's on version 0.44 now, so like we're almost halfway there. So that's what's going to happen if you never descope. Now, it's worked really well for Bay 12 games, but you're unlikely to make the next Dwarf Fortress. There's not a problem with making that kind of game, but you probably want to make a game you can release in 1, 2, max 3 years. You don't want to be waiting an entire console generation. So I need you to keep this tip in mind, even at the end of the talk. So I'm going to teach you today how to make sure that your game doesn't. You don't spend too long on features, or you don't underestimate how much effort there is to ship a game. Even after you understand all the stuff I'm going to tell you, you should still try to cut 25% of your game out and just ship something. So this is the 90-90 rule. We talk about this a lot in the West. I'm not sure if you talk about it here. But the first 90% of game development is really fun. It's enjoyable. You make a cool game. The second 90% is not fun at all. The point is, what you think is 90% is actually 50%. You have no idea how much stuff there is to do. You only think you know. You think you know how much stuff there is in the game. I'll split it up for you now. This is probably what you think of when you think of game development. You think of your core mechanics, running and jumping, your levels, your character controllers, your bosses, dialogue, all of your major systems, your score, your graphics and your audio. In other words, a Nintendo Entertainment System game, or Denzi here, I guess, right? But up until Zelda was actually the first game to add saving. Like the Super Mario cartridge didn't have to worry about anything else. Nowadays, that's just the first half of game development. The second half is this lovely stuff, which is really boring to do, and you're gonna have to do it if you're gonna ship on console. So you've got all of your menus, which are more advanced than they ever were, leaderboards, achievements, which have to plug into PlayStation and Xbox, a proper save and load system that will work in the cloud, localizing your game into Russian, English, German, French, etc., Japanese, metadata, which is your store page, porting to different consoles, remapping controls. Like, there's literally a ridiculous amount of things that you're going to have to do. And you should probably get started on some of them right now, rather than waiting until the end of your game and just having this gargantuan mountain of really boring stuff to do. So, yeah, there's a shit ton of stuff. So what can you do about this, right? There's 2 routes you can take. One is the traditional route, which most new indies or new game developers do, which is they try and cut down and then eventually just cross the bridge when they come to it. So you just wait until you have a game and then worry about these problems. I suggest you take route B, which is prepare immediately. Pretend you're making a console game, because you are. Like, you should just be making a console game because money's on consoles. Steam is overloaded with games nowadays. Mobile is especially. So if you just treat your game like a console game now so that you can make it into a console game later, then you're going to be in a much better position. So first of all, you're going to have to get access to DevNet, which is the PlayStation backend, or Xbox Developer Portal as soon as you can. Or there's actually the Switch Dev Portal. I believe there's a gentleman from Nintendo here at the conference. Please don't bombard him with requests after I say this, but you should probably try and get access to like the Nintendo developer system if you don't. Then you read the TRC list. I'm not allowed to share what this looks like, so here's my artist rendition of what a TRC list looks like, super secret. You're going to have to read this entire list of hundreds of boring things that you have to comply with to ship on console. It sounds boring, because it is, but you need to read every single one of them, and you can't. I promise you, I ignored this because I was like, how bad can it be? It's bad, right? So there are hundreds of these things. I'll give you one example, and you'll see this throughout many games. Your UI can only be within the middle 90% of the screen. You'll see this everywhere. Here, look at Spelunky. Notice the $ starts exactly there at the edge. This is Meat Boy. The counter is just within the 90%. The Witcher, just within 90%. There is one other way you can get around this, is you can tell the player to resize the monitor screen at the beginning of turning on the game. But you have to comply with one of these. This is the easiest way for an indie game developer to do it, to just make sure your UI is within the cutoff limit. It's so that if you have a monitor with black on the outside, then the player can see. But that's just one TRC that you might not have known before. And that was from page 30. There are hundreds of pages. You need to read every page of this document, and you need to figure out which ones matter in your game to you. Now, that sounds like a daunting, horrible task, but actually, you will figure out that 90% of them don't apply to you. But you have to find the ones that do. If you are making a VR game or an online game, it's over for you. The rest of your life is TRCs. You're just going to be doing this forever. If you're making a single-player game, it's actually pretty chill. There's not that many, but you need to be aware of all of them. Because if you start making your UI now, and you put it at the corner, then that's work that you're wasting doing something wrong. So let's knock out some systems now that you can go home and do today without having to access the Sony backend or anything to prepare yourself for console. So first of all, save system. Lots of people use, e.g. in Unity, they use player prefs, or they use a rudimentary save system. You should be trying to save all your data in one giant byte array that has all of the game's data in it. So like every level, every score is just read out of this stream, because that's how you're going to save your data in like on PlayStation. It just takes a byte array on most consoles. This will work across everything. So when I first heard this, I was like, this sounds horrendous. But after I did it, it's actually quite easy, and it makes more sense, especially because on consoles, they have a requirement that you tell them how big your save files will be. So you need to know the maximum possible save file of your game. So if you've got it in a byte array, it will only ever be one file size. It will be the exact size of your data. Unless you have something like Skyrim where, the file size can change. But most indie games, you're tracking like your levels, your scores. There's only a limited number of things you're actually tracking, and you can just mark a version number. Okay, so localization. We're going to be on this all day because this is abysmal. You should go home and start this immediately. Like, really, tonight, DevGAMM party, we'll all get drunk, and then you're going to go home drunk and start writing your loc system. You need to. You need to stop adding your text into the game in strings. You need to stop making it appear like this. You need to use a system based on IDs instead. If you have a really complicated localization system, then you can use strings, but then you don't need to be at this talk if you're at that stage, right? You should basically have a big spreadsheet of every single thing anyone ever says in your game, a number assigned to it, and then a bunch of dictionaries for every single language. So like Russian, English, Japanese. and switch them out on the fly. And this will make your life a lot easier later. Because if you're at a point where you've got all these little scattered strings across loads of scripts and game objects, and you've got to then convert these to different languages later, that's going to be a ton of work. You can save yourself loads of effort in the future by just writing a wrapper on it now. But you aren't done with localization yet. I promise you, this goes on for a while. Right? Существует много языков. You need your system to work with many fonts. Like, you're going to have a Cyrillic font. You're going to have a Latin font. You're going to have katakana, hiragana, Hanzi for every single language that you're doing. So because of this, you're also going to need a description for translators and a maximum character count. So if you've got like a thing that says score on a leaderboard, and it's just 5 letters long, but in German it's like Scorenstein or something. Okay, it wouldn't be that obviously, but if it's some huge word, then you're going to need to tell the translators, you need this to be 5 characters long. And you're going to have to provide context, because this happened recently in Grandia HD Collection. They had to translate the word miss, as in, I missed my opponent. But they instead heard like Gospoda, like Fräulein. And this is how every time you miss an attack, it says like lady, lady, lady. So you got to make sure that your translators, who aren't going to play your whole game and don't care that much about your game, they just want to do their job and earn their money, you need to give them all the context they need, because you know better than them what you need them to translate. But localization, unlike every other job in the world, if I hire a programmer to do something, I can tell if he did a bad job. I can't tell if a localizer did a bad job because I don't speak the language. So it's the one job where they can really like do a terrible job and you'll have no idea. If someone does MS Paint work for you when you hire them to do art, you'd fire them, but you can't figure this out with a translator. So you need to be extra vigilant and make sure they have all the information they need. And it never ends, it keeps going. There's 71 kana, hiragana and katakana. There are 3,000 common Hanzi for Mandarin. There are 11,172 Hangul permutations if you do Korean. There are 25,000 possible Hanzi if you do the like advanced Chinese. Arabic's written from right to left, so all of your systems are not going to work anymore because everything's going to be in the wrong place. So especially this stuff, the first 4, if you're using, say, I use Unity, so I use TextMesh Pro a lot. It's not actually a font, it's lots of pictures, like rasters of letters. So you're not going to put 11,000 or 25,000 characters in your game. You're going to need to write a system that picks the actual letters you use. So you're going to have to read all your strings, find the letters you do use, and add them to it's just going to be a nightmare. You need to just get ready for this, because this nightmare's coming. If you're going on console, I promise you're going to have to live this nightmare. You're going to go insane. You're going to be tearing your hair out, so better start it today. And so this is not the last 3 months of your development. Also, you need to license your fonts, which costs money. So that's fun too. So next, you're going to need achievements, which also need localization. So that's fun. And these are really easy to add. This is another thing you can go home and add today. Just a wrapper on top of everything that's responsible and tracking all the stats. Now, achievements seems like something that should be the same on every platform, right? Achievement unlocked is done. But some platforms store, say you have like 50 things you have to unlock, they will store how many of the 50 things you have. Whereas I think it's on Sony, or maybe it's Steam, one of them stores a %. So you don't say, I have 5 out of 56 things. You say, I have, and I can't do that fraction in my head, so I don't know why I did that, like 8% or something, right? You're going to have to write a system that's going to take all of this data and then make it sensible for Steam and make it for console. But this is something you can easily add now, so you don't have to worry about that later. Input. Again, I'm sorry to make this so Unity-centric, but if you're in Unity, you need to go and buy Rewired today, because you're not going to, like, believe me, Unity's input system is terrible, but Rewired will work with every single controller, and moreover, it will do this magic thing with player-controller matching. So this is another TRC that you might not be aware of. Say I'm playing on my PlayStation, and I'm signed in as me, and then you are my friend and sitting next to me, and I log out of my account and hand the controller to you, and you log in. That controller is still player 1, but it's signed into your account instead. So your controller has to know both the current player and the current account that's tied to it, so that if you sign out of one controller and sign into the other, the players swap. And these are required. Rewired will do all that for you, so you don't have to think about that. So it will take that nightmare away. But there's other things you have to do, like make sure there's Xbox buttons. They change to PlayStation when you plug in a DualShock on your computer. If you unplug all your controllers, it shows keyboard buttons. But the running topic of this is, you should try and make stuff right the first time, because you're going to make all these little systems wrong. Like, you're going to do a saving system now that you're not going to be able to use on console. You're going to make your own input system that you're going to have to completely rewrite. So if you make sure that in the first place everything's written correctly, then you're not going to run into this problem. You should think about these things, even though you may think you don't need them now. You just make sure they're written well now, then you're going to save yourself time. So when you're just prototyping, you don't have any funding, you've just started, it's okay to have a little hacky dev menu where you press a button and it jumps to a level. But as soon as you actually get to the release of your game, if you're still using dev shortcuts, you should stop using them completely. If something's inconvenient for you to access as a developer, if I have to press a certain button combination to go to a certain level, you should be focusing on making sure your menu gives the player the ease of access that you have as a developer. It shouldn't be slow and tedious for your players to quickly change level if it's quick for you, because you're not going to get annoyed by it because you're pressing your keyboard shortcuts. So you should, yeah, anyway. You've got your ratings next. So at some point you're going to have to record 30 minutes of footage of your game to show the violence and the drugs and gore and all of this, to make sure that your game can be rated 3 or R or whatever. So for different regions, there's different authorities. You've got ESRB, PEGI, CERO, and they're expensive. PEGI costs something like €1,000 for your first platform and then 600 for the next ones. I don't know the exact numbers nowadays, but it's expensive to get your games rated. Luckily nowadays, I think at least for Switch, you can use IARC to get your games rated, which is free and pretty simple. But I think at least one of the platforms still requires you to run through these, and definitely if you want to go into Japan. And by the way, it doesn't hurt to learn Git. I thought that it was for nerds, and it's terrible. I mean, it is, but you should learn it anyway, because at some point, you're going to have to branch for different platforms, right? So you've got, you'll have like your Nintendo branch and your Sony branch, and together, you know, you'll be able to just switch them out on the fly instead of having all this Nintendo data in your Sony build. And if I just quickly add a tip, if you learn regex, it's going to help you. You can learn it in a day. I thought this was a terrible idea. I learned it the other day, and I'm kicking myself that I didn't learn it earlier, because you can do all your achievement lists really quickly if you know how to do this. Your audio, I'm going to have to rush through this now because we've got much time left, but your audio person's going to hate your engine. They're going to want you to use Fmod or wires, so you're going to have to figure out which of them you're going to use. That's going to break everything in your game repeatedly. So what you need to, okay, this is stuff you can save. You can do all this stuff later, porting, making sure your bugs are fine, remapping your controls. But largely, all of the stuff we've shown now is it's changed it from this 90% to now you're aware of 140% of the things you need to do. There's still the other 40% you're not aware of. But you can make a much more informed decision about how long dev cycles should take. Your bug list is going to go from 50 bugs to 800 bugs at some point. So you're going to have to just throw some of them out and be like, fine, as long as it's not game breaking, leave your bugs in, just release. But one last thing, one last tip. update your engine every revision, please, because I didn't do this. And it turns out this is 2 months before my game came out. I realized that I updated fmod, 0.1 of a revision, and it broke everything, and I had to rewrite the entire system, and it just murders you. If you're releasing on Sony, or on PlayStation, or on Switch, the platform holders force you to update to the revisions. You can't stay on Unity 2018 forever. They are going to make you be on Unity 2019.4 or something. So you should always be updating your game engine so that you don't suddenly run into this wall of, I have 800 bugs that the new version's made, and I've got to fix them all immediately. If you search my Twitter for fucking Unity, you'll find me getting really annoyed at new updates, which it happens, you know. Although there is this one time I actually did manage to update Unity 2 versions without any bugs, so that was a miracle, though. That doesn't normally happen. So you should be updating constantly. Okay, well, I've been Alex Rose anyway, and feel free to ask me anything.